Well, last night you and I concluded what has been a pretty long and substantive journey, I would say. We've had a lot of conversation on this channel in recent months about a complete unknown. Any big time music biopic that comes out, this one being big time as it is about a Nobel Prize winning songwriter in Bob Dylan, who, in ways that are quite demonstrable, changed the music landscape permanently, with the iconoclastic reverberations of his performance at the 1965 Newport Folk Festival. That in some ways that maybe in some sense could be overstated, but in others are quite plainly the fact. I mean, he turned the music scene on its head with that performance, just by being authentic to himself in a way that was fearless, that was not at all squeamish about alienating audiences. And from that moment forward, for many decades since, Bob Dylan has never shied away from confronting audiences. You can see videos on that topic, as well as I caution those new to the Bob Dylan live experience who are going to gravitate toward his 54 at least shows that are scheduled at age 84 as of May 24th this year. Those coming to the live Bob Dylan experience for the first time after having seen this movie and wanting to go see the dude in person and just stand there in awe before this historical figure, depicted in an 8-time Oscar-nominated biopic, A Complete Unknown, might be in for some shocks. So check out my video on this channel called Bob Dylan's Hilarious Tour Schedule, full of cautions. And believe me, you need to go see Bob. I'm not at all telling you not to go see him. Go see Bob Dylan live. Just go in with the right mindset, and then you'll be fine. All right. But last night, I mean, there are multiple ways of seeing the fact that A Complete Unknown came away with yet another big fat goose egg, as it did at the Golden Globes. At the Golden Globes, it was nominated for 3 awards. Here, it got a bulky 8 nominations at the Oscars. You would think maybe it could have squeaked out, I don't know, Best Adapted Screenplay or something, but not even that. 0. Goose egg. Man, it was... again, I've had my problems with the film's narrative. I've also had lots of praise for the film's actors. Okay, I think as an exhibition of masterful acting, this film is practically unrivaled. But man, the problems with the narrative perhaps caught up with the film in the end as it tried to make the round in that final lap in this award season. As I talked about on my last video on this film, we had every reason to believe, or at least suspect, that A Complete Unknown was rounding that final turn, perhaps with some momentum at its back, and it didn't quite work out for A Complete Unknown last night. Chalamet, having the weekend before shockingly beaten out Brody to become the youngest actor ever to win Best Actor at the SAGs, youngest by years. Nicolas Cage last century did it at age 32 to set that standard, and finally here comes Timothée Chalamet, who, by his own admission, was utterly stunned to win Best Actor at the SAGs. And by the look of his body language last night at the Oscars, wearing a what I found to believe an absolutely killer outfit in this, like, blazing, glowing, like, sort of almost lime green a blazer that, of course, Conan O'Brien singled out, noting that he definitely would not get hit on his bicycle in that outfit. He looked sharp, but it looked like a bit of a sting there for a second when Brody's name was announced, and you sort of saw Chalamet go, and turn over to Kylie Jenner over there and absorb the blow. But then, as any professional in a setting in which he's aware that the cameras are always watching, gathered himself quickly and made his respect for Brody known, applauding him as everyone else did that night. So yes, Adrien Brody coming away with a widely anticipated award. It's his second Best Actor Oscar. He hadn't done it since he was 29 years old. He's now 51, I believe. Back in 2003 for The Pianist, the Roman Polanski film that again had Holocaust themes, as does The Brutalist, which came away with several Oscar victories last night, despite the AI controversy that I was discussing with you a couple videos ago. Perhaps the AI controversy got its licks in at the SAGs, but the film ultimately recovered from whatever effect, if any, that might have been. There were some AI jokes last night. Conan O'Brien went there in his opening monologue. They had some giggles with respect to AI. So it's in the room, it's in the air in Hollywood. It's a bothersome topic throughout Hollywood, but perhaps not quite so bothersome as to have denied the Brutalist this major award in the form of Adrian Brody's best actor victory last night. So you could sort of, on the final day, the day of the Oscars itself, see this coming. While there were reasons to believe that maybe a complete unknown was coming home to some Oscar wins in that final lap of this 2025 awards race, if you checked out my channel yesterday, the day of the Oscars, you saw me post several stories comprising Oscars predictions by some primo, really credible sources like Gold Derby, one of the best in the game in terms of predicting Oscars winners. When they came out with their predictions, and I posted them on this channel or that morning, the morning of the Oscars, yesterday morning, it did in fact show a complete unknown winning nothing. And unfortunately, they were right. None of the 8 Oscars were shown to be winning in Gold Derby's pre-Oscars predictions. They turned out to be correct in that. Look, it would have been unheard of for Chalamet to win last night in a couple of respects. Unheard of in the sense that, as Variety reported, after he, actually just before he won the SAG Awards, in Variety's preview of the SAG Awards the week prior to the Oscars, said, quote, "No actor has ever won the Oscar for Best Actor with only a SAG victory leading into the ceremony." I'll repeat that. No actor, it's never happened, has ever won the Oscar for Best Actor with only a SAG victory leading into the ceremony. In fact, since the SAG Awards' inception in 1994, only 6 actors across all 4 acting categories have won an Academy Award with SAG as their major sole precursor. Okay, so it would have been unheard of in that respect. Chalamet also would have been the youngest actor ever to win Best Actor had he pulled through last night. As I've mentioned previously, the youngest actor on record to win Best Actor at the Oscars is a guy named Adrian Brody, who did it at age 29 in 2003 for The Pianist, and did it again last night for his remarkable second Best Actor award. I mean, major kudos to Adrian Brody. It's an astonishing achievement for him, and a powerful testament to the man's talent. It wasn't just the SAGs leading into the Oscars that lent some credence to the possibility that a complete unknown had a shot at least coming home with an Oscar or two last night. I mean, prior to the film's release, there was a lot of pre-Oscars buzz. I went over that weeks and weeks ago on this channel, and one of the more persuasive points or arguments in favor of a complete unknown's chances at the Oscars was a simple one. James Mangold, the director of A Complete Unknown, has been around for a long time. This guy's been making films since I was a child. I mean, with films like Copland and Girl Interrupted, when Angelina Jolie came home with a huge Oscars win for that fascinating film. Later on, Ford versus Ferrari did an Indiana Jones movie. He's the only director, I believe, other than Steven Spielberg, to direct an Indiana Jones movie. That's how much Hollywood trusts this man. That is the extent of the goodwill that he has amassed throughout Hollywood over the decades. So this guy has blossomed into one of the heaviest hitters among directors that Hollywood has ever seen at this point. Okay, so yeah, you just might have thought it was perhaps time for James Mangold to punch through for an Oscars win. I mean, nothing is owed to the man. I'm not at all saying that. Not everyone gets an award, as I think Whoopi Goldberg said after the Barbie film was kind of snubbed at the Oscars last year. It's true. I mean, not everyone who just by virtue of sticking around Hollywood long enough gets an award, but there were reasons to believe that perhaps Mangold's time was coming to him with A Complete Unknown. Just generally, I think there are a few things that made it difficult for A Complete Unknown to punch through last night for a big win, like a Best Actor, like a Best Director, like a Best Picture. It just couldn't, in my view, and this is totally subjective, okay, so go ahead and at me if you want, it's fine. But I just don't think, and even as a huge Dylan fan, I'm saying this, and even as a huge fan of the acting in A Complete Unknown, even while I had many deep, profound misgivings about the film's narrative, and I'll review a couple of those points here, I just don't think A Complete Unknown could quite match the emotional depth or topical weight of its competitors. I mean, Anora, with its exploration of the sex worker culture, a stripper marrying the son of a Russian oligarch. I mean, choosing a new pope in conclave. The brutalist with a Holocaust survivor trying to make good as an architect immigrant in the United States following World War II. The statement that film makes about art, makes about survivors of brutalities like the Holocaust. This film about an arrogant 20-year-old hitchhiking from Minnesota to New York City to make good as some kind of folk hero wasn't quite going to be able to contend, I think, emotionally or substantively with those topics. And that's, believe me, I am as aware of anyone on the planet and I've said this again and again here at The Curious Listener, of the significance of Bob Dylan's achievement at the 1965 Newport Folk Festival, all the way on up through his Nobel Prize victory, the importance of which I have discussed at length on this channel. You can go back and check that out. I have a playlist, by the way, on this channel to make it easier for you to find all of my discussion about the largely unfortunate state of music biopics and music documentaries in the 2020s, in the 21st century generally, really, especially in the last 15 to 20 years. It's been a rough go for music biopics, which gets me to another, perhaps, a problem for A Complete Unknown's chances last night. Timothée Chalamet, I was struck by this, won the SAG Award, actually said in his acceptance speech on stage that night, he sort of grumblingly, almost under his breath, conceded that, yes, the biopic genre is a little, quote, tired. He used that word, so don't just take it from me. You've heard that enough from me, believe me, I get it. But Timothée Chalamet himself, in accepting an award for his role in the very film, in the very biopic, right, that he's talking about in his acceptance speech there, is himself saying, yeah, I get it. The biopics, maybe it's a little bit of a tired genre. And he said this to highlight one of the reasons why he was stunned to have won that night. Okay? It's true. It's just true. The biopic is tired. There have been now dozens upon dozens of music biopics about music artists whose genius changed music in ways that were lasting and in some cases permanent, world-shaking artists. And unfortunately, while there have been some highlights, I've gone over all of this, the Johnny Cash biopic directed by James Mangold, the biopic about Ian Curtis of Joy Division in 2007 called Control, the biopic about Ray Charles. Long ago, the biopic about Tina Turner, let us not forget. There have been some great biopics out there, okay? But more recently, in the last 15 years or so, they've kind of sucked. The mediocrity has been unrelenting. I've gone all over on about that in prior videos. You can check that out. And I think that to some extent, that kind of a precedent makes it difficult these days for biopics to gain real traction at the Oscars. That might, again, this is all subjective, have been one of the things that held A Complete Unknown back in that final lap in the awards race. Not all that criticism aside, there were some, in my view, some things that were really compelling about A Complete Unknown, even with and it's not just my, misgivings about the narrative. There were plenty of complaints about the fabrications, the departure from the facts of this moment in Dylan's career that James Mangold indulged in his film. He and Jay Cox, his co-writer for the screenplay. But there were some really compelling, believable scenes in this film that, whether or not it won any Oscars last night, still are worthy of regard and will have a lasting impact on the actors themselves and perhaps on the biopic genre as some kind of a standard by which hopefully future biopics could base their projects off of. Boyd Holbrook, I've gone on and on about him too, summoning all his skills as an actor to dig deep down into the soul of Johnny Cash and finding a kind of vaguely dark menace there and bringing that out in his performance as Johnny Cash. I thought he was brilliant. Monica Barbaro, fiery in multiple scenes in this film. At one point, kicking Chalamet's Dylan out of the Chelsea hotel room that he sort of invited himself into after waking up in the middle of the night to find him with his guitar slouched over his lap at his desk writing a song. And she at one point says, "Oh, why are you here, Bob? Just so I can observe you, the whiz kid songwriter, writing a song in front of me? Get the F out of here," she tells him. There's another scene when she flips Bob Dylan the bird on stage at the 1965 Newport Folk Festival. These are probably fabrications, but what I love about them is that they're poetically accurate, as the author of the book upon which the film was based, Dylan Goes Electric, says, and I think that's beautifully put. What it gets poetically accurate is Joan Baez's confrontation of Dylan's arrogance. She was not afraid or intimidated by this kid, okay, and she called him out on his arrogance in ways that this scene gestures at. In scenes that, fabricated though they may have been, I think were true to the spirit and soul of Joan Baez herself. And Monica Barbaro carries these things out brilliantly in this film, and I think was eminently deserving of her Oscar nomination for Best Supporting Actress. Going in, you had to know that Zoe Saldana was going to have the upper hand over Monica for her role in Emilia Perez, and goes on winning that award. But you also had, speaking of the more compelling scenes in A Complete Unknown, Elle Fanning. I mean, doing a wonderful job as Suze Rotolo. Her character, though, is named Sylvie Russo in the film for reasons I've discussed in prior videos. You can go back and check those out in that playlist. With her body language and her face staring into the vastness of the fame that Dylan is realizing at that moment in his career and sort of shrinking away from it, in part out of a kind of sense of self-protection. That wasn't necessarily something that she wanted to be a part of. Gazing into the open maw of the gargantuan fame that Dylan was amassing at that moment, and feeling like maybe that wasn't quite for her. This is why Dylan reportedly, according to Mangold himself in interviews, did not want Suze Rotolo's name used in the film because she didn't have a stage name. She wasn't a celebrity. He didn't want the spotlight of the fame that other bigger names depicted in this film, Pete Seeger, Joan Baez, right? He didn't want Mildy Guthrie, for that matter, played by Scoot McNairy in this film. He didn't want to involve her in that spotlight in this movie, and requested that her name be changed to Sylvie Russo. Speaking of Woody Guthrie, there's another compelling scene, right? I mean, watching Scoot McNairy have to use his body in this film, punching that nightstand beside his hospital bed to communicate with a young Dylan who is meeting him in the hospital for the first time. These are some really compelling scenes. Unfortunately, however, as I've gone over here, and perhaps these are some of the things that sort of caught up with A Complete Unknown at the Oscars last night, there are a lot of maudlin moments in the film as well. I mean, moments such as the fully formed version of Song to Woody just being readily available to Chalamet's Dylan upon first visiting Woody Guthrie in the hospital, which is a factually inaccurate indulgence that kind of leaves some reviewers, it's not just me, I've seen reviews complain about this. You kind of going like, come on. That's a little much. Come on. The fabricated Judas moment that I've gone over, it isn't that it's inaccurate, which it was. It was inaccurate, but it's just that it wasn't necessary. It was indulgent. It lent it. There's also this bizarre indulgence of arranging for Rotolo or Sylvie Russo, as she's called in the film, ride off to Newport on the back of Bob Dylan's motorcycle. This never happened. She wasn't there. It's inexplicable to me, still, as to why the decision was made to add that to the film's narrative when it lends nothing to the narrative itself. And again, it's not that these scenes are fictionalized. That's not the point. It isn't that, Mr. Dylanologist or whatever is being some stuck-up snob and insisting that this be a documentary when I know full well that it's not, and its intention was not and could not have been to be that. It's that the consequence of these fabrications ends up rendering the narrative maudlin and sappy. It's corny stuff that softens the effect of the film's more compelling moments. All the while, the acting is brilliant. But man, this I think these were the moments, these maudlin moments in the film. They kind of suck the air out of the room of the viewer's imagination. This tendency in Mangold's storytelling spoon feeds the viewer with this overwrought narrative that robs the viewer of the ability to think for him or herself. That's what corniness does in film. That's why we call it corny. That's why we roll our eyes at it. That's why we sigh at it, as some reviewers did, even while this film was largely critically praised. And I also, speaking of rolling your eyes, I rolled my eyes at this one story that came out in which Mangold was claiming that, his film is a film that, as he put it, wears its heart on its sleeve. And he said there's a hostility to movies that wear their heart on their sleeve. We shouldn't be embarrassed to feel, but there's a distinction between wearing your heart on your sleeve and being outright sappy. I think you can wear your heart on a sleeve in a way that's gritty and compelling and memorable, and a way that honors the kind of skepticism and cynicism and jadedness of a 2020s audience. rather than calling upon them to summon the gullibility required to swallow these sappy scenes that are cut straight out of the cloth of like 1980s films such as E.T. or Flight of the Navigator. Interestingly, there was a documentary about Joey Kramer, the child actor in Flight of the Navigator, just came out several years ago, in which one of the people is saying in the film that films like Flight of the Navigator cannot be made. You will not see films like that or E.T. anymore. Because the audience isn't there for. We live in a different world now, a cooler age. By cooler, I mean a more jaded, more skeptical audience. And so you have to be aware of that. Read the room, Jim. So I think the overstepping those bounds to the extent that this narrative did might ultimately have made it difficult for a complete unknown to punch through. Now, a lot of good came out of this film nonetheless. So it didn't win an Oscar. Fine. It won a SAG, historically so. Chalamet making history as the youngest to win a SAG award. Now, that's part of this film's enduring legacy, right? This film generated a huge spike in interest in Bob Dylan's music, and that's a wonderful thing from the standpoint of this diehard Dylan fan and Dylan fans all around the world. You have to rejoice in that. It was widely reported that upon this film's release, Dylan's music soared up the charts. On streaming platforms, it was in much greater demand. So that's a wonderful aspect of this film's legacy too. I am so grateful for what this film did for Bob Dylan. The acting, as I've said, is brilliant throughout, and regardless of the problems that I see and other critics see in the film's narrative with respect to its kind of maudlin manner, the acting is thoroughly enjoyable. And now, speaking of the enjoyable acting, here's another wonderful thing to come out of this film. We are kind of the insiders now, right? We people who loved A Complete Unknown, now we get to say years from now, we were on to Monica Barbaro when she was just in her mid-30s playing the role of Joan Baez in that film A Complete Unknown. Remember that from 15 years ago? And maybe some will, maybe some won't. And you'll be the cool kid at the party, right? Who can say, you remember you were on to Monica Barbaro when she just got her first nomination for Best Supporting Actress, right? Timothée Chalamet, I mean, obviously the sky's the limit for this kid, right? Huge things are ahead for him. But we got to see him in the role that won him his first SAG, his historic SAG award, right? Elle Fanning, perfectly well established, and this is yet another stepping stone to greatness, I think, for her. Boyd Holbrook, Scoot McNairy, these two, we get to see what's ahead for them now after having really asserted their talent in this film. That too is going to be an interesting part of this film's legacy, and the anticipation of what's ahead for them is going to be fun to ponder and see in the years ahead. So this film was great for Dylan. It was great for great acting. It was great for the book on which the film is based. Dylan Goes Electric is a fine, resonant account of this moment at the 1965 Newport Folk Festival. I read this book. I encourage you to do the same. If you're a Dylan fan, if this film resonated with you, go check out the book, man. Get it on Audible and listen to it while you're driving to work, whatever. It's well worth it. The author of this book does a great job exploring that moment at the 1965 Newport Folk Festival, the events that led to it, that made it possible, what it meant during the event, what it meant after the event, the aftermath of it, the extent to which it changed music, which it absolutely did. The book does, in my view, a grittier, more powerful job than the film of getting that across. Lastly, you know what else was wonderful that came from this film? How about that surprise appearance by Mick Jagger at the Oscars last night? Did you stay awake for this? Were you still around? Had you fallen asleep yet? Mick Jagger, to the surprise of everyone, comes out and starts taking digs at Bob. And he and Bob, of course, go many decades back. These weren't the first digs that he's taken at Bob, and I suspect Bob has taken more than his share of digs at Mick over the years. And he comes out and says that Bob was asked to present, I think Mick was presenting the Oscar for Best Original Song. And Mick jokes that Bob was asked to be the presenter. Reporting today indicates that, in fact, he wasn't joking. Bob really was asked to present this award and turned it down. He was asked, reportedly, to perform at the Oscars last night and turned that down. But it gets hilarious when Mick says that Bob suggested, maybe they should get someone younger, meaning Mick, who might be younger by, 5 minutes than an 83-year-old Bob Dylan. I think Mick, he might be a few years younger. I'm not sure as we sit here exactly what age Mick is. He might be around 79 or 80 years old at this point in his life. So that was kind of funny, and Mick came out to a shocked audience. It gave him a rousing reception, which at this stage in Mick Jagger's life and career was a really moving moment, and he ate it up as he always does. So that moment wouldn't have happened had it not been for A Complete Unknown, had it not been for A Complete Unknown's 8 Oscar nominations, right? So I think my message to you, if you are a Dylan fan who was hoping for more for this film at the Oscars, if you're just a fan of the film itself and you're just embarking upon a path of discovery of Dylan's work, boy, do I envy you, by the way, if in fact that is you. Perk up. Just because it came away with a goose egg last night doesn't mean that there isn't much to beam with pride over with respect to A Complete Unknown. And, there's a note of bittersweetness here because this is a wrap, right? I mean, there isn't going to be a much more to add to this discussion. Perhaps I've added too much already as it is. I'll be honest with you, man. I was really excited to see that this film was coming out and excited about the opportunity that this channel presented me to discuss Dylan. I think hundreds of comments have been generated, by the way, hundreds of likes by my videos on this film over the past couple months or so. And I just want to say thank you so much for coming by, for stopping by, for participating in that discussion, for providing it sometimes really helpfully critical feedback of some of those videos, some really wonderful positive feedback on those. You guys brought some fresh, interesting, fascinating ideas to that discussion. Some interesting perspectives on the state of the biopic these days as it relates to Dylan and other overarching geniuses in music. So I just want to say this has been really fun for me, this discussion of A Complete Unknown that I've been able to have here at The Curious Listener. And it wouldn't have been half as fun had it not been for you stopping by and lending your voice to this discussion. So last night's Oscars ended this journey for us at The Curious Listener, but I'll be back with much more going forward. I've got a lot of ideas in store and hopefully discussions to kick off with your participation in the months and years ahead. So thank you for stopping by for this discussion of A Complete Unknown, and I hope to see you back here soon at The Curious Listener.